Chapter 1: The Werewolf Threat. The town of Greenvale was a peaceful place, nestled between rolling hills and thick, ancient forests. For years, the villagers had lived in harmony with nature, their lives marked by the gentle rhythms of farming and trade. But recently, a shadow had fallen over Greenvale. A series of brutal attacks had left the villagers living in fear, afraid to venture out after dark. The culprits? A pack of werewolves that roamed the nearby forest, hunting under the cover of night. The town square, once a place of lively commerce and cheerful gatherings, now held an air of tension. Villagers hurried through their errands, casting nervous glances toward the tree line that loomed in the distance. It was here, in this uneasy atmosphere, that our adventurers found themselves. Grom, the steadfast fighter, stood with his companions near the center of the square, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. Beside him, Eldrin, the wise and cautious wizard, surveyed the area with a critical eye. Lyra, the druid attuned to nature's mysteries, was silently observing the dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Thorn, the roguish and sharp-eyed thief, leaned casually against a nearby post, though his gaze was anything but idle. As they stood there, a figure approached them, a man in fine clothes, though his face was etched with worry. It was the mayor of Greenvale, and he had come to seek their aid. Sound of footsteps approaching, the murmur of the town square in the background. "Good day, travelers. You must be the adventurers I've heard so much about. My name is Mayor Caldwell, and I'm in desperate need of your help." His voice was tinged with fear, but also with hope. "What troubles you, Mayor?" Grom asked, his tone respectful but firm. "We've heard whispers of danger in these parts." The mayor nodded, his expression growing graver. "It's the werewolves," he said quietly, as though speaking their name might summon them. "They've been attacking our people, coming down from the forest at night. We've lost good men, women, even children. Our town is small, and we don't have the means to defend ourselves against such creatures." Eldrin stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in thought. "Werewolves are no ordinary beasts. They're cunning, strong, and driven by a dark curse. Tell us, when did these attacks begin?" "It's been over a month now," the mayor replied, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. "At first, it was just livestock. But soon, they grew bolder, attacking anyone they could find. We tried to defend ourselves, but our weapons do little against them. We don't have enough silver to make proper weapons." Lyra's voice was soft but firm as she spoke. "The forest is old, and it harbors many secrets. The werewolves are but one of its dangers, and they will not stop until they've claimed this town as their hunting ground. We must act quickly." Thorn, always the pragmatist, cut to the heart of the matter. "What do you need from us, Mayor? We're not here to offer false hope. If we take this job, we'll need to know everything about the forest, the werewolves, and any other dangers lurking in the shadows. We need you to hunt them down, find their lair, and put an end to these attacks," the mayor said, his voice trembling slightly. "The people of Greenvale are counting on you. If you can stop these monsters, we will reward you handsomely. But more than that, you'll have our eternal gratitude." The adventurers exchanged glances, each of them weighing the risks and rewards of this mission. They had faced many dangers before, but werewolves were a different kind of enemy, one that required more than just skill with a blade or a well-cast spell. But they had never turned away from a challenge, and they weren't about to start now. Grom nodded, his decision made. "We'll take the job, Mayor Caldwell. But understand this, fighting werewolves is no easy task. We'll need time to prepare, and we'll need to gather as much information as we can. But rest assured, we will do everything in our power to protect your town." Relief washed over the mayor's face as he clasped Grom's hand. Thank you all. You're the heroes we need. I'll have the villagers provide you with any information you need. And please, stay at the inn tonight, your rooms will be on the house." With their course set, the adventurers began to make their plans. The town of Greenvale had hired them to rid the forest of the werewolf threat, but the path ahead would be fraught with danger. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows over the town, the adventurers knew that the true test of their courage and skill was about to begin. Chapter 2: The Curse of the Werewolf Forest. The adventurers knew that to face the werewolves, they would need more than just silver and steel, they would need knowledge. After accepting the mayor's plea, they made their way to the local tavern, a place where rumors and stories flowed as freely as the ale. The tavern, known as the Moonlit Boar, was filled with nervous villagers, their faces pale with worry. As the adventurers entered, conversations hushed, and all eyes turned toward them. The barkeep, a stout man with a thick beard and a wary expression, motioned them to a table near the hearth. It was clear that the villagers saw these adventurers as their last hope. Sound of a door creaking open, murmurs quieting, footsteps approaching. Evening, travelers. Name's Rurik. The mayor told me you'd be coming. What'll it be? First rounds on the house, as a thank you for what you're about to do for us. Much appreciated, Rurik, Grom replied as he sat down, nodding to the others. But we're here for more than just a drink. We need information, everything you can tell us about the forest and the werewolves. Rurik's expression darkened as he set down a round of tankards. I figured as much. It's the forest you'll want to hear about, first. Old as time itself, that place is. Folks say it's cursed, and after what's been happening, I believe it. The werewolves didn't always trouble us, you know. Something stirred them up, something dark. Lyra leaned in, her eyes narrowing. What do you know of this curse, Rurik? Curses don't come from nowhere. Rurik hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was eavesdropping. It's an old tale, he began, his voice low. They say a witch once lived deep in the heart of that forest, a woman with powers over life and death. The villagers feared her, so they drove her out. She cursed the land with her dying breath, swearing that the forest would never know peace again. The werewolves, they're just part of that curse. And they've been getting worse. Worse how? Thorn asked, his tone sharp. They've gotten bolder, Rurik explained. Used to be, they'd stick to the deepest parts of the forest, only coming out when the moon was full. Now, they're coming closer to the town, attacking more frequently. And there's talk that they're being led by something, or someone. An alpha, maybe, stronger and smarter than the rest. Eldrin stroked his chin thoughtfully. An alpha werewolf, that would explain their increased coordination. But we'll need more than just rumors. Who else can we talk to? Old Marla might know more, Rurik suggested, pointing to a corner where an elderly woman sat, hunched over a mug of tea. She's lived here longer than anyone and knows the forest better than most. Just be patient with her. She's seen things that driven others mad. The adventurers exchanged glances, then made their way over to Marla's table. The old woman's eyes were clouded with age, but there was a sharpness in her gaze that spoke of a keen mind, undulled by the passage of years. She looked up as they approached, a wry smile curling her lips. Sound of footsteps approaching, a chair scraping as someone sits down. So, you're the ones who've come to face the beasts, Marla said, her voice a raspy whisper. Brave or foolish, I'm not sure which. What do you want to know? Lyra spoke first, her tone respectful. We've heard of the curse, of the witch who laid it upon this land. But we need to know more about the werewolves themselves. How many are there? Where do they lair? Marla chuckled darkly. The curse, yes, the witch. She was my grandmother, you know. Not many remember that. As for the werewolves, they're many, but not too many for a group like yours. They lair in the caves to the north, where the forest grows darkest. But it's not just them you'll face, the forest itself will fight you. It's alive with her magic, twisted and vengeful. And the alpha, he's more beast than man now, but clever. Too clever. How do we find this alpha? Grom asked, his tone direct. You don't, Marla replied with a grin that showed too many teeth. He'll find you. But if you survive the forest, you might have a chance. Silver won't be enough, bring fire. Burn the forest if you must, but do it quickly. The longer you're in there, the less of you will come out. The adventurers thanked Marla for her advice, though her words weighed heavily on their minds. The forest was cursed, the werewolves were many, and their leader was a cunning, dangerous foe. As they left the tavern, the reality of their task began to settle in. They would need to be at their best if they hoped to survive what lay ahead. The moon hung low in the sky as they returned to their lodgings, casting long, ominous shadows over the town. Tomorrow, they would enter the cursed forest, where the werewolves awaited them. But tonight, they would rest and prepare for the battle to come. Sound of the door closing, a howling wind, the scene fades out. Chapter 3, Preparing for the Werewolf Hunt. The next morning, the town of Greenvale was blanketed in an eerie calm. The usual hustle and bustle of daily life had been replaced with a somber quiet as the villagers stayed indoors, wary of the looming threat. The adventurers, however, had no time to waste. They knew that every moment counted, and preparation was key to surviving the dangers that awaited them in the cursed forest. Their first stop was the town's market, where they sought out the blacksmith, a burly man named Thad, known for his skill in crafting weapons and armor. The blacksmith's forge was alive with the sound of hammering metal and the hiss of steam as he shaped molten iron into deadly instruments of war. Sound of hammering, the crackling of a forge fire. "Ah, I've been expecting you," Thad greeted them, wiping sweat from his brow as he set aside his hammer. "The mayor told me you'd need some special equipment. Lucky for you, I've got just the thing, silvered weapons, ready to go." Grom nodded approvingly as he inspected the weapons laid out before them. The blades gleamed in the morning light, their edges sharp and deadly. "These will do nicely. We'll take as many as you've got." Thad grinned, clearly proud of his work. "I've silvered your weapons as best I could. The trick is in the balance. You need a blade that's both light and strong. But silver alone won't be enough. You'll need to be quick, strike hard, and don't let up until those beasts are down for good." Eldrin, ever the strategist, stepped forward. "We'll need more than just weapons. What about supplies for fire? We've heard that fire may be our only hope against the curse that plagues the forest." Thad's expression grew serious as he nodded. I've heard the same. I've got oil and flint, and some torches too. They'll burn hot and long, just be careful. That forest is old and full of dry tinder. One wrong move, and you'll have a wildfire on your hands." Lyra's gaze flickered with concern. "We'll need to be cautious with fire, but it may be our only way to cleanse the curse. We'll take the supplies, and I'll do what I can to control the flames, should it come to that." With their weapons and supplies gathered, the adventurers continued their preparations. They spent the rest of the day consulting maps, planning their route into the forest, and discussing tactics. Each member of the group brought their own expertise to the table: Brom's experience in combat, Eldrin's knowledge of magic, Lyra's understanding of the natural world, and Thorn's ability to move unseen and strike from the shadows. As the sun began to dip low in the sky, casting long shadows over the town, the adventurers gathered one last time to finalize their plans. The weight of the task ahead was heavy, but so was their resolve. Sound of rustling maps, quiet conversation. "We've got the weapons, we've got the plan," Grom said, his voice steady. "But remember, werewolves are unlike any foe we've faced before. They're fast, they're strong, and they don't fight fair. Stick together, watch each other's backs, and don't hesitate. If we do this right, we'll be back in time to see the sunrise." Thorn smirked, his tone light despite the tension. "If we do this right, they won't even see us coming. Let's show those beasts why they should have stayed in their den." Eldrin added, his voice full of determination, "We've faced dark magic before, but this curse is something different. Be ready for anything: illusions, traps, even mind tricks. But remember, magic can be broken, curses can be lifted. We just have to find the source." Lyra nodded, her expression calm but focused. "The forest is my domain. I'll guide us through the dangers, but even I can't predict everything we'll face. Trust your instincts, and trust in each other." With their resolve firm and their spirits high, the adventurers prepared for the night ahead. The town of Greenvale was counting on them, and failure was not an option. As the last light of day faded, they knew that the true test was about to begin. They would enter the cursed forest, hunt down the werewolves, and confront the dark power that had plagued this land for far too long. Sound of footsteps fading, a distant wolf howl as the scene fades out. Chapter 4, Into the Cursed Forest. As the moon rose high above the horizon, casting its pale light over the town of Greenvale, the adventurers made their way to the edge of the cursed forest. The trees stood tall and ominous, their branches twisted and gnarled, as if reaching out to ensnare any who dared to enter. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and a cold wind whispered through the leaves, carrying with it the faintest echoes of distant howls. The townsfolk had gathered at the outskirts of the village, watching silently as the adventurers prepared to venture into the darkness. There was fear in their eyes, but also a flicker of hope, a hope that these brave souls might succeed where others had failed. Sound of rustling leaves, the distant howl of a wolf, murmurs from the villagers. Grom tightened the straps on his armor and adjusted the grip on his sword, the silvered blade gleaming in the moonlight. Stay close, everyone. Once we're in the forest, we move as one. No one strays off the path. Lyra stepped forward, her eyes scanning the tree-line. She could feel the ancient magic pulsing through the earth, a dark energy that seeped into the roots and leaves. This forest is alive with the curse. It's more than just trees and shadows, it's a living entity, twisted by the witch's spell. Be on guard. The forest will try to turn us around, confuse us. We must keep our wits about us. Thorn, ever the pragmatist, checked the straps on his pack, ensuring his tools and weapons were secure. If this forest wants to play tricks, it picked the wrong group. I'll scout ahead, but not too far. If something's out there, I'll see it coming before it sees us. Eldrin's eyes glowed faintly as he muttered an incantation under his breath, casting a protective spell over the group. Magic may be at the heart of this curse, but we've got our own magic to counter it. Stay within the circle of light. I've enchanted our path to reveal any illusions or traps. And remember, fire is our friend. Be ready to use it. With their preparations complete, the adventurers plunged into the forest, the villagers watching until they disappeared from view. The path ahead was narrow and winding, choked with undergrowth and flanked by towering trees that seemed to close in around them as they advanced. The further they went, the darker it became, until the only light was the dim glow from Eldrin's staff. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of night, crickets, owls, rustling leaves, eerily absent. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Sound of footsteps crunching on leaves, occasional snaps of twigs. Lyra's voice was low as she spoke, her senses attuned to the natural world around her. The trees are watching us. I can feel their eyes, but it's not just the trees. There are other creatures here, hidden in the shadows. We're not alone. Stay sharp, Grom warned, his hand never leaving the hilt of his sword. If something moves, we strike fast. No hesitation. Thorn moved ahead, his steps silent and sure. He melted into the shadows, becoming one with the darkness as he scouted the path. But even he felt the weight of the forest pressing down on him, the sense that something was watching, waiting. Sound of Thorn's soft footsteps, the creak of branches above. The forest was a labyrinth of twisted paths and hidden dangers. The adventurers moved cautiously, their every sense on high alert. More than once, they caught glimpses of movement out of the corners of their eyes, dark shapes flitting between the trees, too fast to be seen clearly. The further they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became, as if the forest itself was trying to drive them away. Suddenly, Thorn froze, raising a hand to signal the group to stop. He had seen something that didn't belong in the natural order of things. Ahead, in a small clearing, the ground was disturbed, as if something large had passed through recently. The air was thick with the scent of blood. Grom stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he surveyed the area. "What is it, Thorn? What did you see?" Thorn's voice was tense as he replied, "Tracks, fresh ones. And blood. Whatever made these tracks is big, and it's close. We're on the right path, but so is it." Eldrin moved to examine the tracks, his expression grim. "These are no ordinary wolf tracks. They're larger, and there's something off about them, almost human, but not quite. We're getting close to the werewolf's lair. Stay ready, there's no telling what we'll face once we get there." With a renewed sense of urgency, the adventurers pressed on, following the trail left by the werewolves. The forest grew darker and more oppressive with each step, the trees closing in around them like a cage. The path became more treacherous, the ground uneven and slick with moss. But the adventurers were undeterred, their resolve strengthened by the knowledge that they were closing in on their prey. The howls began as they neared the heart of the forest, low, mournful, and filled with a primal hunger. The sound sent a shiver down their spines, but it also confirmed what they had suspected. The werewolves were close, and they were preparing to strike. Sound of distant howling, the rustling of leaves growing louder. "This is it," Grom said, his voice a low growl. "We're in their territory now. They'll come for us, but we'll be ready." Lyra nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her scimitar. "The forest is with them, but it's also with us. We can use it to our advantage. Let's give them a fight they won't forget." The adventurers readied their weapons, their senses heightened as they prepared for the battle to come. They were deep in the heart of the cursed forest now, surrounded by enemies on all sides. But they were not afraid. They had come to Greenville to end the werewolf threat, and they would do whatever it took to see that mission through. The forest was alive with danger, but so were they. The final confrontation was drawing near, and they would be ready when it came. Sound of weapons being drawn, the howling intensifying as the scene fades out. Chapter 5: The First Encounter. The cursed forest, once eerily silent, now thrummed with the sound of the hunt. The adventurers moved as one, their footsteps light and deliberate, eyes darting to every shadow that flickered in the dim light. The howls that had once been distant and haunting were now growing closer, their intensity signaling that the werewolves were aware of their presence. The tension in the air was palpable, each adventurer bracing for the inevitable clash. Sound of distant howling, rustling leaves, the faint snap of a twig. Thorn's sharp eyes caught movement to their left, a shadow that darted between the trees, too fast to be seen clearly. He signaled to the group, his voice barely above a whisper. "We've got company. They're circling us, trying to split us up. Stay together." Grom's grip tightened on his sword, the silvered blade reflecting the dim light that filtered through the dense canopy. "Let them come. We'll show them what it means to cross our path." His voice was a low growl, filled with the resolve of a seasoned warrior. Lyra's connection to the natural world was stronger here, in the heart of the forest, but the dark magic that tainted the land made it difficult to focus. She closed her eyes for a moment, calling upon the spirits of the forest to aid them. The forest is angry, but it's also afraid. We can use that. Trust in the trees, they'll guide our strikes. As the group pressed forward, the first of the werewolves made its move. It was a blur of fur and fangs, leaping from the shadows with terrifying speed. The beast was massive, its eyes glowing with a malevolent intelligence, and its claws extended to tear through flesh and bone. It lunged at Grom, intent on taking down the group's strongest member. Sound of a werewolf growling, the clash of metal as weapons are drawn. But Grom was ready. With a roar, he met the werewolf head-on, his sword flashing in the dim light as he swung with all his might. The silvered blade bit deep into the creature's shoulder, and it howled in pain, the sound echoing through the trees. "You'll have to do better than that, beast," Grom taunted, pushing the creature back with a powerful kick. Eldrin raised his staff, arcane energy crackling at its tip. With a swift incantation, he unleashed a bolt of lightning that struck the werewolf square in the chest, sending it stumbling back with a yelp. "Focus your attacks on their weak spots, Silver and Fire. We have to bring them down quickly, before more arrive." Lyra, moving with the grace of a predator herself, called upon the forest to assist them. Vines and roots erupted from the ground, wrapping around the werewolf's legs and holding it in place. "Now, strike while it's trapped," she urged, her voice carrying the weight of the forest's will. Thorn, always quick on his feet, darted in from the side. His daggers, also coated in silver, found their mark in the creature's flank. The werewolf snarled and thrashed, but the combined efforts of the adventurers were too much. "It's weakening, finish it off before it can call for help," Thorn shouted, his movements a blur as he danced around the creature's snapping jaws. Grom didn't hesitate. With a mighty swing, he brought his sword down on the werewolf's neck, the silvered edge slicing cleanly through fur and flesh. The beast let out one final, blood-curdling howl before collapsing to the forest floor, its lifeblood seeping into the earth. The adventurers stood over the fallen creature, breathing heavily but triumphant. Sound of the werewolf's dying howl, heavy breathing from the adventurers. Grom wiped his blade clean, his eyes scanning the darkness for any more threats. "One down, but there are more out there. We can't afford to let our guard down." Eldrin nodded, his gaze stern. This one was strong, but it was alone. The rest of the pack won't make the same mistake. We need to keep moving, find their lair and end this before they regroup. Lyra knelt beside the fallen werewolf, her expression somber. The curse is strong in this one. The forest cries out for vengeance, but also for peace. We must end this, not just for Greenvale, but for the land itself. Thorn retrieved his daggers, wiping them clean with a practiced motion. We're in the heart of their territory now. Every step we take, they'll be watching. But we're not turning back. Not until this forest is free of their taint. With their resolve steeled, the adventurers pressed on, deeper into the cursed forest. The first encounter had been a victory, but it had also served as a warning. The werewolves were powerful foes, and they would not fall easily. But the adventurers were determined, their hearts set on freeing the land from the curse that had plagued it for too long. As they moved forward, the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing denser, the shadows deeper. The howls of the werewolves echoed through the night, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the darkness. But the adventurers were undeterred. They had faced the first of the beasts, and they would face the rest with the same courage and determination. The hunt was on, and the adventurers would not rest until the werewolves were defeated, and the curse lifted from the land. Sound of the adventurers' footsteps fading into the forest, the distant howling growing louder as the scene fades out. Chapter 6: The Lair of the Pack. The adventurers moved deeper into the cursed forest, the air growing colder and the darkness more oppressive with each passing step. The distant howls of the werewolves had become a constant presence, echoing through the trees like a haunting chorus. But there was something else now, an underlying tension, a sense that they were being watched, hunted. The adventurers knew they were getting closer to the heart of the werewolves' territory, to the place where the pack gathered and the curse was strongest. Sound of crunching leaves, the wind howling softly through the trees, distant growls. Lyra's senses were heightened, every rustle of leaves and creak of branches putting her on edge. She could feel the forest's pain more acutely now, as if the very ground beneath their feet was crying out for release. We're close. The land is soaked with their curse, it's strongest here. She reached out, touching the bark of a nearby tree, feeling the dark magic that pulsed through it like a diseased heartbeat. Eldrin's eyes glowed faintly as he used his magic to scan the area. He could sense the lair, a place where the curse had taken root, feeding on the fear and blood of its victims. There's a clearing up ahead. That's where we'll find them, and the source of the curse. Be ready for anything, this is where they'll make their stand. Grom's grip on his sword tightened, his jaw set in grim determination. Good. Let them come. We'll put an end to this, here and now. His voice was a low rumble, filled with the resolve of a warrior who had faced death many times before and emerged victorious. Thorn moved silently through the shadows, his keen eyes scanning the tree-line for any signs of movement. They're waiting for us. I can feel it. We'll need to strike fast and hard, take them out before they can surround us. As they approached the clearing, the forest seemed to grow even darker, the trees pressing in around them like a living wall. The air was thick with the stench of blood and decay, and the ground was littered with bones, human and animal alike. The adventurers stepped cautiously into the open space, their weapons at the ready. The clearing was dominated by a massive, ancient tree, its gnarled roots twisting into the ground like the claws of some monstrous creature. The tree's bark was blackened and scarred, oozing a thick, dark sap that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. Around the base of the tree, the earth was torn and clawed, as if by countless desperate hands. This was the heart of the curse, the place where the werewolves had made their lair. Sound of the wind dying down, leaving an eerie silence in the clearing. Lyra's voice was a whisper as she took in the sight before them. This tree, it's ancient. The curse is bound to it, feeding off its life force. We have to destroy it, or the werewolves will keep coming, no matter how many we slay. Eldrin nodded, his eyes narrowing as he assessed the situation. The tree is the source, but it's also protected by the pack. They won't let us destroy it without a fight. We need to weaken them, draw them away from the tree, and then strike. We've fought worse, Grom said, his voice filled with confidence. We'll take them down, one by one if we have to. Then we'll finish off that tree and end this curse for good. Thorn was already moving, positioning himself at the edge of the clearing where he could watch for any sign of the werewolves. They're here. I can feel their eyes on us. Get ready, this is going to be a fight to the death. The adventurers readied themselves, forming a tight circle with their backs to one another. The clearing was eerily silent, the only sound the faint rustling of leaves in the wind. Then, without warning, the silence was shattered by a bone-chilling howl that echoed through the trees, followed by another and another. The pack was coming. Sound of howls growing louder, the rustling of leaves as something moved swiftly through the underbrush. Here they come. Grom shouted, raising his sword as the first of the werewolves burst from the tree-line, its eyes glowing with a savage hunger. The creature was even larger than the one they had faced before, its fur matted with blood, its claws glinting in the dim light. Eldrin unleashed a barrage of arcane energy, sending bolts of lightning and fire streaking towards the werewolves as they charged into the clearing. Focus on the big ones. Take them down before they can reach us. Lyra called upon the power of the forest, summoning vines and roots to rise up from the ground and entangle the advancing werewolves. But the beasts were strong, and the dark magic that fueled them made them resistant to her spells. They're too powerful, we need to weaken the tree, she cried, struggling to hold back the onslaught. Thorn moved with lightning speed, his daggers flashing as he struck at the werewolves from the shadows. He was quick, but the werewolves were quicker, their claws slashing through the air as they tried to bring him down. We can't hold them off forever. We need to destroy that tree, now. The battle raged on, the adventurers fighting with everything they had to hold back the werewolves. The beasts were relentless, their snarls and growls filling the air as they lunged at the adventurers with a feral fury. But the adventurers were determined, they were unbreakable as they fought to protect the town of Greenvale and lift the curse that had plagued the land for so long. In the midst of the chaos, Eldrin saw an opening, a moment where the werewolves were distracted, giving him a clear path to the tree. He knew this was their only chance. Cover me! Eldrin shouted, raising his staff as he began to channel his most powerful spell. The air around him crackled with energy, the ground trembling as he drew upon the very essence of the forest to unleash a devastating blast at the cursed tree. Grom and the others formed a protective barrier around Eldrin, fending off the werewolves with all their might. We've got your back, Eldrin. Do it now! Grom roared, driving his sword into the heart of a charging werewolf. With a final, earth-shaking surge of power, Eldrin unleashed his spell. A blinding flash of light erupted from his staff, striking the ancient tree with the force of a thunderclap. The tree groaned and creaked, its bark splintering as the dark magic that sustained it was shattered. The werewolves howled in agony, their connection to the curse severed. One by one, they fell to the ground, their bodies twitching as the life drained from them. The clearing was filled with the sound of dying howls and crackling energy as the curse was finally broken. Sound of a massive explosion, the crackling of wood as the tree begins to fall, the howls of werewolves fading into silence. Grom lowered his sword, breathing heavily as he surveyed the aftermath. It's done, we did it. His voice was filled with both relief and exhaustion. Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with sadness as she looked at the fallen tree. The forest will heal, in time. But the scars will remain. We freed it, but it will never be the same. Thorn wiped the blood from his daggers, his expression grim. The curse is broken, but we need to make sure this never happens again. The people of Greenvale need to know what happened here, and they need to protect this land. Eldrin leaned heavily on his staff, the toll of the battle evident in his tired eyes. We've done our part. The rest is up to them. Let's return to the village and tell them the good news. Greenvale is safe, for now. The adventurers, battered but victorious, began their journey back to Greenvale. The cursed forest, once so dark and foreboding, now seemed lighter, as if the very air had been cleansed by their actions. But the memory of the battle would stay with them, a reminder of the power of the curse and the cost of breaking it. As they left the clearing, the ancient tree, now shattered and lifeless, stood as a monument to their victory, a symbol of the battle they had fought and the evil they had vanquished. The forest would heal, and so would they. But the fight against darkness was never truly over. There would always be another battle, another curse, another foe to face. For now, though, they had earned their rest. The town of Greenvale was safe, and the adventurers could return to the village knowing they had done what few could. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Sound of the adventurers' footsteps fading as they leave the clearing, the forest gradually returning to a peaceful silence. Chapter 7: The Aftermath. The sun had begun to rise by the time the adventurers emerged from the cursed forest, their bodies weary but their spirits high. The once dark and twisted trees now seemed less ominous, as if the very land was beginning to heal from the curse that had plagued it for so long. The adventurers had triumphed, but the weight of the battle lingered with them as they made their way back to Greenvale, the town they had fought so hard to protect. Sound of soft footsteps on dirt, the distant chirping of birds as the forest awakens to a new day. Grom, ever the stoic warrior, walked at the head of the group, his sword slung over his shoulder. His armor was dented and bloodied, but his eyes were sharp and alert. The people of Greenvale will be waking soon. They'll want to know what happened, and that they're safe now. His voice was calm, but there was an edge of exhaustion that hinted at the toll the battle had taken. Lyra walked beside him, her connection to the forest more palpable now that the curse was broken. She could feel the life returning to the land, the trees and plants beginning to heal. The forest will remember this day. It will take time, but it will recover. We've given it a chance to heal, and for that, it will be grateful. Her voice was soft, filled with a quiet reverence for the natural world. Eldrin leaned on his staff, his magical energy nearly depleted from the battle. Despite his weariness, there was a small smile on his lips as he gazed at the horizon. The curse is broken, but the knowledge we've gained is invaluable. The power that once controlled those werewolves, it was ancient, older than anything I've encountered before. We must remain vigilant, for there are other forces out there that may seek to harness such dark magic. Thorn trailed behind the group, his movements as silent as ever. He was scanning their surroundings, always alert for danger, even in the light of dawn. We did what we came here to do. But there's always another threat waiting in the shadows. We can't let our guard down, not even for a moment. His voice was low, tinged with the pragmatism of a man who had seen too much. As they approached the outskirts of Greenvale, the town was just beginning to stir. The early morning light bathed the village in a warm glow, a stark contrast to the darkness they had faced in the forest. The villagers, unaware of the battle that had raged through the night, were just beginning their daily routines, but there was a palpable tension in the air, an unspoken fear of what the day might bring. Sound of village life beginning, distant chatter, the clanging of a blacksmith's hammer, the crowing of a rooster. A woman, one of the first to notice the adventurers returning, gasped in surprise and relief. They're back. The adventurers have returned. Her voice carried through the village, drawing others out from their homes and shops. Another villager, a man with a worried expression, hurried forward. Did you defeat them? Are we safe? His question hung in the air, the fear in his eyes mirrored by those of the other villagers gathering around. Grom stepped forward, his voice strong and reassuring. The werewolves are defeated, and the curse is broken. Greenvale is safe. His words brought a wave of relief that washed over the crowd, their fear replaced with gratitude and admiration. The villagers erupted in cheers, their joy and relief spilling over as they crowded around the adventurers, thanking them for their bravery and courage. The town that had been living in fear was now filled with hope, their protectors having succeeded in their mission. Eldrin raised a hand to quiet the crowd, his tone measured but serious. The curse may be broken, but the forest will take time to heal. You must be vigilant, and you must respect the land. It has been through much, and it will need your care to fully recover. His words were a reminder that while the immediate threat was gone, the villagers still had a role to play in ensuring the peace they had fought so hard to achieve. Lyra nodded in agreement, her voice gentle but firm. The forest is your ally, and it will protect you if you protect it in return. Do not forget what has happened here. Honor the land, and it will honor you. Her connection to the natural world was strong, and she hoped that the villagers would learn to live in harmony with the forest that surrounded them. Thorn remained on the edge of the crowd, his sharp eyes watching the villagers as they celebrated. We've done our part. Now it's up to you to keep this town safe. Don't let your guard down, there's always something lurking in the shadows. His words were a stark reminder that the world was full of dangers, and that vigilance was the key to survival. As the morning sun rose higher in the sky, the adventurers were led to the village square, where a feast was being prepared in their honor. The townspeople worked quickly, eager to show their gratitude to the heroes who had saved their home. The mood was jubilant, the fear that had gripped the village for so long finally lifting. But even as they celebrated, the adventurers knew that their journey was not yet over. There were always more battles to be fought, more curses to be broken, more lives to be saved. For now, they would rest and enjoy the fruits of their labor, but they remained ever vigilant, knowing that the world was full of darkness that needed to be kept at bay. Sound of villagers laughing and talking, the clinking of plates and mugs as the feast begins. Grom raised a mug of ale, his voice booming over the noise of the celebration. To Greenvale, and to the bonds of friendship that have seen us through this battle. May we always stand strong against the darkness. His toast was met with cheers and raised mugs, the village square filled with the sounds of celebration. Lyra smiled as she watched the villagers celebrate, her heart light for the first time in days. It's good to see them so happy. They've been through so much, but now they have hope again. Her voice was soft, filled with a deep sense of satisfaction. Eldrin nodded, his expression thoughtful. We've done well here, but there's always more to be done. The world is full of mysteries and dangers, and we've only scratched the surface. His eyes gleamed with the anticipation of future adventures, his mind already turning to the next challenge. Thorn, ever the pragmatist, leaned back in his chair, a rare smile playing on his lips. For now, let's just enjoy the moment. We've earned it. His tone was light, but there was an underlying seriousness that hinted at the many battles yet to come. As the adventurers joined in the celebration, the people of Greenvale rejoiced, their hearts light with the knowledge that they were safe once more. The cursed forest, now freed from the werewolf's grasp, would heal in time, and the land would once again thrive. But for the adventurers, this was just one chapter in a much larger story. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but they knew that their journey was far from over. The world was vast and full of dangers, and there were always more battles to be fought, more lives to be saved. For now, though, they would rest, content in the knowledge that they had made a difference, that they had brought light to a place that had been shrouded in darkness for too long. And as they sat together, sharing stories and laughter, they knew that they would always stand together, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring.